Burning questions.
Insightful answers.
Listener's choice.
With Clement Manyathela.
And today on our Listener's Choice, we are focusing on the process that's currently underway, the recruitment of the next NDPP. This is the head of the National Prosecuting Authority. The process has officially begun today, and this marks an important moment for the justice system, because the NPA head, remember, Advocate Shamila Batohi, is preparing to retire in January. So as we said, even on the open line, there's a total of 30 people that applied for the position, and there was an advisory panel that then sort of brought about the names of 6 people. I don't want to say shortlisted, because the minister actually said the 6 people that are now being interviewed were not really shortlisted, but these are people who met the minimum requirements. So, which is concerning, because the Minister of Justice said during an interview I did with her about 2 weeks ago, she said that they were at least hoping for about 15 candidates that they can shortlist. But now they only had about 6 that meet the minimum requirements out of the 32 candidates that applied for the job. And when I asked her what they discussed as a panel as the reasons why people are not applying for the job of NDPP, she mentioned three reasons. One, they believe that there are people who are afraid of what's happening at the different inquiries where the NPA head is being asked some really tough questions during her testimony. Remember, the Nkabinde inquiry is taking place, but also the ad hoc committee, Advocate Batohi, appeared before that parliamentary committee. The minister also mentioned that the other issue is that this is a poisoned chalice. Like people, Shamila Batohi is the only one who is actually finishing her term. Who else has actually finished their term as the head of the of the NPA? So she's going on retirement. She hasn't been pushed out necessarily. She's going on retirement because that has come before the term actually ends. So the other issue is that it's just a poison chalice. And then, of course, there's also the issue of the salary. There are people who have worked for too many years. They've been in private practice. Even if they would like to give this job a try, the salary is just a deterrent because it's not competitive. So we're looking at this process that's currently underway. The interviews are taking place as we speak now. In fact, today and tomorrow in Pretoria, and they're going to be taken live as well. There are a few people, 6 of the people being interviewed: Nicolette Bell, Hemion Cronier, Andrea Johnson, who's the head of IDEC, Olisile Kanyile, Adrian Mob, and the former NDPP Menzi Simelani. As you've heard on Eyewitness News, the Justice Minister has now confirmed that they received a letter from the DA's lawyers seeking to interdict the interviews for the post of the National Director of Public Prosecutions. And one of the issues that have been raised before was the inclusion of Menzi Simelani on that list of 6 people that are going to be interviewed. Let's bring in now Advocate Stephanie Fick, who is the Executive Director of the Accountability Division at OUTA, who's going to guide us through this conversation. I'll take your calls as well. Remember, I asked you earlier on if you have one specific person you think can do this job better. I've mentioned a few of them. Is there one that you think you favor so far? Or do you want to wait until the interview process and pick up who's doing who's answering what questions, and then you can make up your minds? Or do you already know who you think can be a good NDPP to replace Shamila Batohi? Give us a call on 011-883-0702, or you can send a WhatsApp on 072-702-1702. Advocate Fick, thank you so much for making time. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement. Only a pleasure.
Let's start with, and we'll get to this legal letter that the panel has received, but let's look at this moment that we find ourselves in, where the interviews are now being conducted. What does the start of the NDPP interview process actually signify for our justice system right now?
Well, I think it's just a normal process because the current NDPP is retiring. So we need someone that can, take the NPA and take it into the future. what is worrying about this process, except for, the candidates and that they meet the minimum requirements and all of that, is the fact that they waited so long to start this process. It is the 10th of December. She's retiring at the end of January. What are you going to get in terms of handover? So we are not even talking about...
Advocate Fick? Okay, something is happening there. Advocate Fick, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Sorry, you got cut off there earlier on. Please, if you can continue your point, yeah?
Yeah. So if you think about the time that is left for whoever they picked at the end of this interviews and all of that, how long time will this new incumbent have to actually take over from Shamila Batoy? So I think they left it too late. Now they are leaving half of December. I mean, everyone is on leave and everyone is shutting down in order to have a well-deserved break. Now they are looking for a incumbent of a very, very important position, a position that we've seen in the past has created problems. I mean, a number of the incumbents have been removed. So didn't they leave this a tad too late? And I think one should rather take your time in getting the right person than getting a person in order to fill this position.
And I suppose the reason I'm asking about what this process signifies for our justice system is because there are some South Africans who feel like, the head of the NPA has not really been able to do what she promised she would do when she got the job. There are people who are feeling frustrated about the lack of prosecutions, especially on state capture cases, lack of prosecutions when it comes to high profile cases. So there's currently, this level of frustration in as far as our justice system is concerned. And I wonder how intentional then this panel is going to be to ensure that they really get South Africa the best of the best, because we need to see these prosecutions. What qualities and competencies should the panel be prioritizing as they interview these candidates?
Sure. So let's go through them. I think I share, the listeners' frustration with what have we seen the NPA do. And I think one of the answers is I think that there's too much political interference. Plus, the NPA form part of a whole criminal justice system. The NPA can prosecute, but the NPA can't prosecute if a court doesn't work. The NPA can't prosecute if there's no investigations. So it doesn't help fixing only the NPA. You need someone there in charge of the NPA that can take the NPA forward, that can have these discussions, that can stand up to political interference, that's independent, that will prosecute without fear and favor, and that will have the best interest of South Africa at heart, that is at, no stretch of the imagination, politically involved. So you need a strong, independent person that can stand up, like I said, to political interference and really take South Africa's worries, South Africa's frustration, and turn it around and say, we are looking at an NPA that will fight for, I want to say, the ordinary South African.
Yeah, and then from your perspective, though, what are the most urgent challenges you think are facing the NPA, and how should these interviews test whether those candidates can address them? I know, it's sometimes it's easy for us to criticize the lack of prosecutions, but there are nuances also here, and I'm not suggesting here that there have not been any failures to prosecute. There have been. We've spoken about it on the show before. But I'm saying there are issues around budget cuts, for instance.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want a well-capable NPA, you want the best of the best as prosecutors, you've got to be able to capacitate the NPA and, so that it's able to do that job effectively. It's not just about political interference. It's about the capacity of that institution as well. And you've got to ask the question of whether or not they are set up to fail, or if indeed they've got the capacity that they need.
A very good question, because I think a lot of other civil activist organizations has been fighting for, the independence of the NPA. So to go back to what you are querying, is the NPA is, let's call it a department within, the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. The head of the NPA does not have control over salaries, for example, doesn't have control over how much budget is allocated to the NPA in order to get people with experience and all of that. And then again, you have to see the NPA in the bigger picture, which includes the police. Oh, at the Matlanga Commission, we've seen the problems that we are currently facing with the police. The police are solely responsible for a lot of the investigations, on the ground intelligence, making sure that hotspots are, looked after, that we investigate the corruption cases, the racketeering cases. If we do not have the investigative capabilities, you can build the NPA as much as you like. You're not going to get anywhere. And then our courtrooms, do we have the number of interpreters we need in order to deal with a long court case? Because we have accused that has got the right to hear, the proceedings in their mother tongues. So the NPA is but one clock in the wheel of the whole, the wheel of justice. But I do think, so if you ask any incumbent of this office, what are you going to do? My answer is going to be, it doesn't matter what this person answers. They have to look up to their they have to look at the department firstly, and then obviously the minister, and is so dependent on that political will, what happens in the NPA, that I think one of the deterring reasons why we do not have an enormous amount of candidates is just that you can promise the world. There's some things you will never be able to deliver on if your department and the political will is not there to change how we deal with prosecutions.
Yeah, and speaking of some of the candidates, I mean, the minister, when I interviewed her 2 weeks ago, she said that it's actually quite concerning that there are only 6 people who are meeting the minimum criteria, but also they were hoping that there were going to be quite a lot of people, probably in their hundreds, who are going to apply for this job, but not so much because, one, people see it as a poison chalice. They know that historically, if history is anything to go by, they're going to get this job and they're probably going to be out of a job because maybe there are politicians who are going to feel like you're not listening to us, you're not taking the pressure, so out. There are people who feel like, yes, I may be appointed now, but Cyril Ramaphosa is not going to be here in 5 years' time. So what if there's a new president who comes in who wants their own NPA head, if, of course, the ANC will still have more influence in this GNU, or they win a majority of government, or in fact, it's another party that wins elections. What if they want their own NDPP? But also the issue of salary that is not competitive, and the pressure, because people see the head of the NPA appearing at these commissions, so they think to themselves, is this going to be my life where I get asked these tough questions publicly like that? So that becomes pretty tricky. But I want to get your thoughts on what was in the news now, where the Justice Minister is confirming that they've received a letter from the DA lawyers seeking to interdict the interviews. And as you know, there have been issues raised about Advocate Simelane because he has been the head of the NPA before. He clearly wants that job back, but there are some concerns around his not just capacity, but his integrity, because there was a matter in the Johannesburg bar. He was investigated, and the bar now wants have taken him to court. So there's a process that's currently underway. Do you think that him being allowed to be part of the 6 somehow muddies this process?
I do think so. I think that, and I think it comes back to the amount of time they have left in order to pick this new, the new NDPP, it does raise questions, unfortunately, that out of a big pool from, the different bar associations, attorneys out there, etc., you have 6 candidates. 6 candidates. That's not shortlisted. That, according to the minister, is the only ones, that fulfills the minimum requirements. And then you have a candidate. I mean, there's quite a number of candidates there that, for personal view, that has got questions marked. Now, I feel sorry for anybody that's now going to go through interviews. You are going to be put under a microscope, and everybody's going to have different opinions. But at the end, this is a very public process. It should be transparent. And that if you have one incumbent that, just on the face of it, without digging deeper, appears to not be, a good candidate for the position. And that if, say, for instance, 5 of the others fall out, are you going to appoint this person? And I think that the answer should be no. You should be looking for the person that will fulfill this position in the best interest of, South Africa, and that you shouldn't pick someone because we're running out of time. I heard something very interesting, and I think this sort of speaks to the problems that the NDPP will be any new NDPP will face. Is that the number of investigators that we had with the Zondo Commission was more than the current ID has. Now let that sink in. A commission whose recommendations we are not, convinced has been implemented, that there's no political will to implement it, had more investigators that the current ID has that is supposed to investigate and prosecute big corruption cases. Now, where is how does that make sense? And that is the type of thing that your NDPP is going to be, face, and budget cuts and all of that. So I don't envy the position, and I think that's the problem. No one, envies the position, because what really will they be able to achieve? Yes, you can create a positive working environment, which I think a lot of prosecutors need. There are some good people out there that only want to do their jobs. But unfortunately, you have the bad apples in management, and they need to build the trust, because people they don't trust the NPA currently.
So there are some people who, following the comment the minister made about how some of the candidates are just scared of being interviewed publicly. And I remember the minister saying, well, if you're going to be the NDPP, that's the kind of thing you're going to be engaging in consistently. You have to hold media briefings. You have to be held accountable in the media. You've got to address, members of the public. You've got to address the stuff. You're a leader, so you've got to be able to engage on issues. But then there's a question also that other people have been asking about whether what we are seeing here is not a deterrent. You are being grilled by panel members for several hours, and that is happening in full view of the cameras. Do you think that is a deterrent? Because, I am on radio every single day, Advocate Fick, but I don't know if I've got the capacity and the bravery to sit in front of a panel for 2 hours being interviewed and taking a job interview. And that's happening publicly. The cameras are watching. It's live. Yeah. People criticize you as you go.
That is unfortunately part of the job. We've moved into an era where everything is on TV. Unfortunately, due to a number of reasons, we need transparency. Because the trust deficit we have with government, unfortunately, requires us to say, but we want to see it being transparent. What I do not agree with, and what I've seen in the past, is also, this political ball that is being played by political parties, that they ask absolute ridiculous questions. That is really just you playing to the TV. And without criticizing the DA directly, I have to ask, again, it's a political party that's trying to stop this process. I haven't read their papers, so I really can't say. But sometimes you feel that this is a bit of a political ball, a party leader sitting there asking questions and wanting to win, score a political point. That is also what the process is not about. But a person that is willing to take up this position, I agree with you. This is a leader. This is a person that will face hard questions. This is a leader that, for this specific position, has to take an organization and create trust with the public, and will have to withstand some scrutiny. That's part of the job. If you can't, if you can't stand up to the bullies out there, then you shouldn't be applying for this position. You must also just remember that these are also incumbents that is used to the criminal justice system. If you are an advocate, if you are an attorney, you are used to an adversarial system. We have an adversarial system. So you have two advocates fighting opposites of a point. There's always someone that's going to disagree with you. And you need to be able to, whether everybody agrees with you or not, will have to fight for your point. So when I say there's part of this process that I think people in the, the legal fraternities are sort of used to people attacking them from a number of ways. But I sometimes just think that it gets out of hand. And who is responsible? There, I said the panel is responsible to make sure that the decorum in that is also upheld.
Absolutely. And the nice thing with this panel is that it's not a political process, unlike when there are judges in the JSC that are being interviewed where political parties are represented. Part of the panel here, Professor Somatota Fikeni is the chairperson of the Public Service Commission. Brilliant mind, rational man. You've got Zakani Maluleke as well, who's part of the panel, who is the Auditor General, South Africa's Auditor General. There's Ntabi Singh, Sipanya Mogale, who is an advocate. There is Nkosana Mvundlela, who is an attorney and is the current president of the Black Lawyers Association. So at least we don't have to worry about panel members veering off what they're supposed to ask, which is within the scope of the work of an NDPP or what happens in the criminal justice system. At least we've got panel members that are probably going to ask some really, really good questions. So that's what's happening today and tomorrow. We're trying to find a new NPA head. Advocate Stephanie Fick, thank you so much for talking to us about this process that's unfolding over the next 2 days. She's the Executive Director of the Accountability Division at OUTA.